All right, let's dive in. Today, we're heading back to the 16th century, to South India, to talk about a ruler whose name is basically legendary, Krishnadevaraya. He's the man who took the incredible Vijayanagara Empire to its absolute peak. And his story, well, it's a masterclass in how to build an empire.
Just stop and think about that for a second. A Portuguese traveler shows up in southern India in the 1500s and says the capital city is as big and beautiful as Rome. That's some serious praise. This is the world we're stepping into, the world that Krishnadevaraya not only ruled, but really, truly built. This one quote just sets the stage perfectly for the grandeur we're about to see.
So, who exactly was this king? Krishnadevaraya came to the throne in 1509. He was part of the Tuluva dynasty, and his father was a powerful general who had pretty much been the power behind the throne. But here's the thing. He wasn't handed a perfect, peaceful kingdom. No, what he inherited was a complete and utter storm.
And get this, his entire reign was just 20 years long, from 1509 to 1529. In just 2 decades, he completely transformed the Vijayanagara Empire. Historians all agree this was its golden age, a time of incredible military victories, an explosion of culture, and just breathtaking architecture. He wasn't just a ruler, he was the architect of an entire era.
Okay, so before we get to all the amazing stuff, you have to understand the chaos he stepped into. The throne he sat on was, to put it mildly, unstable. The empire was being torn apart from the inside and was surrounded by enemies who were just waiting for a chance to pounce. His story isn't just about ruling, it's about surviving against insane odds and then, somehow, thriving.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It tells you everything you need to know. It's a story of constant backstabbing and turmoil. For decades, power wasn't passed down peacefully. It was taken by force. A coup in 1485, then a regent taking over, then another coup in 1503 by Krishnadevaraya's own brother. This is the shaky, fragile foundation he had to build his empire on.
And it wasn't just the politics inside the palace. He was literally surrounded by threats. Inside his own borders, you had nobles and local chiefs just waiting to rebel. To the north, the powerful Deccan Sultanates were a constant menace. To the northeast, the Gajapati kingdom was a huge rival. And then you've got the Portuguese showing up on the west coast, a new naval power looking to make a move. It was an absolute pressure cooker.
So, what do you do when you're a new king and everyone wants you gone? Well, if you're Krishnadevaraya, you don't wait for them to come to you. You go on the offensive. He didn't just defend his kingdom, he expanded it. His military campaigns are the stuff of legend, a total masterclass in how to win wars and secure an empire.
One of his first and biggest tests was against the Gajapati kingdom of Odisha and its ruler Prataparudra. Now, this wasn't some minor border dispute. This was a massive war that was going to decide who really controlled the eastern part of the subcontinent.
What's so amazing is watching his strategy unfold. It's not just one big battle. First, he launches a full-on invasion. Then, he methodically lays siege to one key fort after another, cutting off his enemy. And only after he's totally outmaneuvered him on the battlefield does he finally corner Prataparudra. But here's the genius move. The war doesn't end with total destruction. It ends with diplomacy.
And this is just brilliant statesmanship. After crushing his rival in battle, Krishnadevaraya agrees to a political marriage. Prataparudra's daughter becomes his wife. This wasn't about love, of course. It was a treaty sealed with a wedding, turning a dangerous enemy into a stable, neutralized neighbor. He knew exactly when to fight and when to talk.
The Gajapatis weren't his only problem, though. The Deccan Sultanates of north were always a threat. He crushed the Sultan of Bijapur and took over the Raichur Doab, a super valuable piece of land. He even got involved in their politics, putting a sultan back on his throne. But this slide also hints at something darker. While he could beat them one-on-one, their combined power would, years after he was gone, spell doom for his great city.
But Krishnadevaraya's legacy is so much more than just his military victories. He was the force behind a massive cultural renaissance. All the wealth from his conquests, he poured it into art, architecture, and literature, sparking a golden age that would define South Indian culture for centuries.
You know, you can learn a lot from a ruler's titles, and his are just fascinating. Lord of the Kannada Empire shows his roots. Andhra Bhoja is all about his support for Telugu poetry. King of 3 kings, I mean, that just screams power. And that last one, Restorer of the Yavana Kingdom, that's the title he got for helping out that Bahmani Sultan, proof of his incredible political skill. At the very heart of his court was this deep, genuine love for literature.
He brought together this legendary group of poets called the Ashta Diggajas, which literally means the 8 elephants, who were seen as the 8 pillars holding up the entire world of Telugu literature. I mean, this list is basically the rock star lineup of classical Telugu poetry. You've got Alasani Padana, who's called the father of Telugu poetry, and of course, the one and only Tenali Ramakrishna, whose jokes and clever stories are still famous today. Can you just imagine the creative energy in that court? It must have been electric. And here's what makes him truly special. He wasn't just a patron cutting checks for artists, he was one of them. He was an incredibly talented scholar and poet himself. He wrote the Amukta Malyada, a true masterpiece of Telugu literature. He didn't just support the arts, he lived and breathed them. So, what's the lasting legacy of this incredible reign? Well, it's literally written in stone all across South India. But it's also a story tangled up with controversy and the shockingly fast collapse of the empire after he died. His golden age was absolutely brilliant, but it was also tragically brief. You can still go and see his legacy today in the ruins of his capital, Hampi. It's breathtaking. He built these amazing temples, like the Vitala Swami temple with its famous stone chariot. But he was also a practical guy. He built huge irrigation tanks to help his people farm. In fact, those iconic temple towers you see all over South India, they're often called Raya in his honor. But look how fast it all went wrong. He dies in 1529, and right away, power struggles begin. The big controversy surrounds his son-in-law, Aliya Ramaraya. His whole strategy was to play the sultanates against each other, but it backfired badly. In 1565, the sultanates decided they'd had enough, and they united against him. The Battle of Talakota was a complete disaster. The great city of Vijayanagara was destroyed, and the empire never really recovered.
You know, the collapse was so fast and so brutal that it makes what Krishnadevaraya accomplished seem even more incredible. To really get it, you have to look at all the different roles he played. So let's break his reign down into 5 key facets.
First, he was a flat-out military genius. This wasn't a guy who sat in a tent miles from the action. He led his armies from the front, making split-second decisions and inspiring his soldiers. He took a kingdom that was on the verge of collapse and, through sheer strategic brilliance, defeated every single one of his enemies. He made Vijayanagara the undisputed superpower of its time.
Second, he was a master diplomat. He knew that winning on the battlefield wasn't enough, you had to win in the courts too. He made a smart alliance with the Portuguese to get access to war horses and guns, which gave him a huge advantage. And like we saw, he used marriage as a political tool to turn enemies into allies. He was playing a game of 4D chess while everyone else was playing checkers. Third, he was an unparalleled patron of the arts. His court wasn't just a place of politics, it was the heart of a cultural explosion. By bringing together the Ashtadigagajas, he basically created the perfect environment for poetry and learning to thrive. For him, art wasn't just a nice-to-have. It was a symbol of his empire's greatness. Fourth, the man was a visionary builder. His legacy is literally carved into the landscape of South India. Yes, he built stunning temples that were works of art, but just as importantly, he built the infrastructure, the massive water tanks and canals that allowed his kingdom to prosper. He wasn't just building monuments to himself, he was building the foundations of a healthy society.
And finally, when you put all these pieces together, you get this. He became the symbol of an entire era. When people talk about the glory of Vijayanagara, the power, the wealth, the culture, they're almost always talking about the 2 decades when Krishnadevaraya was on the throne. He achieved a perfect, brilliant balance that the empire could never find again.
Which leaves us with a pretty deep question, doesn't it? Krishnadevaraya built this incredible, powerful empire, a marvel of its age, and yet it completely fell apart just a generation after he was gone. So what does that tell us about power? Is a legacy about what one person can build, or is it about building something that can last long after they're gone? It's something to think about.